Well, thank you, everyone. And then there's going to be recordings. People will be hearing the recording later. So thank you, Dawn and iPad Gene for coming on live. And my name is Scott Guerin, and I'm a psychologist. I have two masters and a PhD in human development with a focus on spiritual development. Um, and the only reason driving me in psychology was that I've been a seeker since the time I was a teenager, and I just got involved with psychology later in life, like around 40 years old. And I went back to school and I just needed to know more and more. I had gone through a few different Protestant denominations, kind of searching for answers, searching for connection. And it didn't work out well for me. So I just dove into psychology, trying to understand the mind and the spirit and how they intersect and those types of things. So as I worked in the actually healthcare industry, I was going pretty much full time into psychology and spirituality. So this is the result of decades of learning and I feel that this book, Awkward Awakening, was a message given to me to write. I had an Akashic record reading, and the reader just told me you're going to be given a scroll, and you're going to take the next year to learn how to convey this information. So it wasn't like I don't know if you are familiar with just a typical download where I get verbatim, but it was more ideas, the middle of the night type of things where, sometimes I get an idea, sometimes I get a sentence or two, and then sometimes I'd start getting like paragraphs or outlines of content, like, well, this is a chapter right here. And then I'd like, oh no, I have to get my phone and start writing this down because I knew I never remember it. Um, but I feel that if you're not aware of that there is a consensus among many spiritual people, certainly astrologists, psychics, channelers, that we are in a stage of awakening on planet Earth. You almost can't go anywhere without hearing that that theme being repeated over and over again. And I think this is the part of it that I have to help people understand what's going on and give them some sort of guide to navigate this, to understand what's going on and why, and to navigate the next coming years because I think they're going to be interesting. Not calm, probably tumultuous. But that's the purpose of this book. And the two things, well, the one big driver of this for me was, let me see. Okay, that something's happening. Obviously, you look around the world and you see, incredible things going on, structures and things that had been in play for hundreds of years being torn down, not only in the United States, but around the world. And that's what kind of drove me that, what is going on? How does this tie into ascension and awakening? And so that's when I started digging. So what's going on and where are we headed are the kind of the two drivers for me and what I hope that this book answers for you. So the agenda for tonight, I'm going to have a lot of information that I'm going to provide, and I'm going to focus on a couple things. But the information that I'm skipping over or hitting lightly are going to be outlined in detail in the book Awkward Awakening, and so and it's on sale online and in person at the Circles of Wisdom. Um, so forgive me for that. It goes against my grain. I'd love to have 4 hours, but I can't. So I'm going to hit some things a little bit light, but to give you a feel of what the content is and the message, and then we'll hit some other topics a little more in depth to get, so that you can have a takeaway that takeaway from this session tonight that will hopefully propel you a little bit more in your journey. So, introduction to awakening. The big thing, and I've been tracking this for my entire life, a shift from religion, organized religion, to spirituality. There's so much data backing up that people are making that move. They consider themselves more spiritual than religious. They're certainly less affiliated with organized religion. There's an increase in psychic services. This is over the last 10 to 20 years. Um, and the key thing for me, and I didn't realize this until maybe 2 years ago, and I think this could be a driver in this whole idea of awakening, is that more people on the planet are meditating on a regular basis. In the United States, it tripled from 2009, excuse me, 2019 to like 2023. And to me, that gives me hope that that's the driver. You know, we talk about raising our vibrations, raising our capacity to love and kindness and oneness. Meditation to me, is one of the most easiest things to do, and also most effective things that I can do and you can do that will impact the planet. You know, because it'll help raise our levels of awareness, vibrational activities, and that. So that's what's happening in this world. So another thing that is a result of this, not as a result, say byproduct, is that we're transitioning from a third to fourth, and fourth to fifth dimension. And I'll get into this in a minute, but our basically our we are living, you know, what we see here right in front of you. The physical world is the third dimension. Height, width, and depth. Those parameters are the physical dimensions, and then some people add a fourth. The fourth dimension is time, but I'll get into that in a minute. But that means that we're becoming more aware of other dimensions, other parts of ourselves that we haven't ever been aware of before. And some people call this a thinning of the veil. And that's the veil between physical world and non-physical world, you know, psychic senses. Those things are all coming into play. And one of the drivers, well, several of the drivers are in this awakening ascension. I was fascinated to learn about a year ago about the yugas. Are you familiar? Anyone familiar with the yugas, the ancient Hindu system of and concept that the Earth, and this is real, that the Earth is wobbling. Right. You know, the Earth is tilted, and that's how we experience the seasons. But it like a top that's slowing down. It wobbles, and the ancient Hindus knew this, and what they kind of looked at it was to take a light beam from the North Pole and shoot it out into the stars. And because that wobble is occurring, that will make a circle, right? You know, if you figure it's wobbling, it's creating a circle, and they divided that circle into four yugas. And the first two yugas were considered kind of dormant, spiritual darkness, more of less expression of spirituality and connection. And then the last two, the second two, are a time of great awakening and great oneness, unity consciousness, a great time. So it takes 29,000 years for that circle to happen, the Earth's wobble. So the first two happen 14,000 years. And as I mentioned, so we're coming out of the second one, first one. The second one is the Kali Yuga. And so for 10,000 years, the Hindus have been saying we're moving out of the Kali Yuga into the Satya Yuga, and they explained a great time of awakening, awareness, of oneness, of connection. However, another component of that transition is great tumultuous time. Corruption will be exposed. There'll be structures that have been in place for many years be torn down. It's like a tearing down before a rebuilding into a new Earth and a new way of thinking, a new system. And so that was interesting to learn. Then I learned too about the Mayan calendar. And I don't know if you remember back, I think 2020, everybody goes, "Oh, the Mayan calendar is ending. No, what does this mean?" What that meant was that the 13th back turn was ending on the Mayan calendar. What people didn't say, and I didn't hear it, was that it's the start of the 14th back turn. And guess what that is characterized by? The 14th back turn is a time of great spiritual awakening, awareness, connection. The same thing as moving from the Kali Yuga to the Sati Yuga. And the other thing is that the time of transition will be tumultuous, will be exposing of corrupt, the same thing, right? So you're looking from the ancient Hindus to the ancient Mayans, and they're talking about a similar scenario. In addition, the Great Purification, the Hopi Indians, indigenous groups, talk about the same thing. It was just amazing to me, and that was part of the aha moment for me. Like, this is real. Like, what we're going through is real. And then certainly in Christian and Islam, we have the new earth scenarios where there's a time of, a total remake of what our planet is, what the humans on this planet are going to be experiencing, our behavioral changes, and how that's going to affect our planet in a variety of ways. So that's one aspect, a few different aspects of awakening, and how I kind of got the alert that not only, am I, supposed to be adding my two bits to this discussion, but that there's many, many other people saying the same thing. And so that I think kind of outlines kind of the shift that's going on. And just one thing about the shift, and I have up there in the title, the paradigm shift. And I start off in my book talking about a paradigm shift. And the great example that I used is Nicholas Copernicus, right? So 15th century, like philosopher, I think he was a teacher as well. And, and I kind of map it out, kind of like what it was like for him to be walking out in the night sky and say, and notice, like, wait a minute, I don't think that the earth revolves, that the sun revolves around the earth. I just don't think so. And he started working it out in his head, I'm sure, modeling it out. And he started thinking like maybe this is going against everything that everybody knew. Aristotle, Ptolemy, the scientific community at the time, which was the Catholic Church, all said no. The Earth is the center of the universe. And there's a couple Old Testament verses that say that. So they had their scriptures, they had their scientific pillars saying, the earth is the center. But yet he's still, and then certainly the wanderers, right? Everything made sense in a sense. You'll go out and you look, the moon goes around the earth, the sun goes around the earth. But what are these other lights in the sky that seem to be wandering? They don't go around the earth, they're wandering. And the Latin word for wanderer is planetes, right? So these were the planets that no one really knew about. And I'm sure people knew that there were things didn't make sense how they were moving, but that he was trying to work that in to the new model, which was the heliocentric model. The sun is the center of the solar system. And when he did that, then everything fell into place. All the planets, many, many things fell into place for him. But he knew that the church would not like that idea. And so he waited until his deathbed to publish his books called The Revolutions of Heavenly Spheres. And because he knew he was going to get in trouble. So on his deathbed, he published that. And then it wasn't until like 30 years later that Galileo picked it up. Actually, Giordano Bruno picked it up and started thinking, talking about this and other things. But we know what Giordano Bruno had. He was assassinated, and Galileo was put in house arrest for not just this, but for other things that went against the quote unquote scientific and religious communities. So that what I'm talking about, a paradigm shift, is to this nature, that things are going to change. Like, and this is my personal opinion, that our current state of the world right now, people are like, oh, well, this is going to pass and everything's going to go back to normal, maybe what it was like 10, 20 years ago. Personally, I don't think so. I think it's going to be a paradigm shift where things are going to be so different and humans will have greater capabilities in certain areas, certainly psychic and sensitivities, that it is going to be a new Earth. And I'm going to introduce this very gently. There's going to be a greater connection with our ET neighbors, our galactic neighbors, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So as I'm talking about this and thinking it through, one thing that came to mind was like, people have got to move on to modern day sources, especially um, spiritual sources. And by that, I mean channelers and channeling, right? So I'm sure at least some of you know it, channeling is people channel different entities. My other book that I co-wrote with Nicole Bigley, Looking for Angels, people are angel channelers. They channel specific angels all the time or entities, and there's also people that channel extraterrestrials on a regular basis. And it's not. This is not TikTok channeling. This is not like somebody got. These are people that have been channeling specific ET entities and even celestial and angelic for 10, 20, 30 years and writing tons and tons of books. There's wealth of information out there generated from these channelers that have been downplayed and maybe ignored, possibly because it goes against most organized religious beliefs. But my point is that we should at least consider what these people have to say, because think about it. The New Testament was almost half of it was written by one person, Apostle Paul. And what did he say? How did he get his information? Oh, well, it was God breathed. Literally, that's what, his words inspired by God meant. God breathed. And that is a wonderful definition of what channeling is. You get information from outside of yourself. So that is, and you'll see when we get moving on, that I start again gently, because that's what I believe this book is a good help in doing, to move people. Just take a little baby step, consider these things, don't get freaked out by it, don't immediately turn it off, but let's consider, what Dolores Cannon has to say, or Lisa Royal Holt has to say, or so many others. Let's consider it and see what happens. So that's kind of the impetus of this book and the framework of what I've been tasked to do. So where to start? A couple big things. The first place to start is that try to understand that we are multi-dimensional beings, right? As I mentioned before, we live in a third dimension, right? Length, width, and height. And everything's, can be, hot, you can knock on wood, we can not, things are hard and appears to be solid. But there are other dimensions that are non-physical, that exist and we can experience. Now, in the physical models, we have obviously the three dimensions and time, and the higher dimensions on the physical side, the theoretical physicists are really mathematical. String theory was part of that, and that the higher dimensions they identified were curled up or compactified, and they're so small they can't be seen. So that's kind of their, physics, at least right now, is where they are with the physical models of the other dimensional models of the physical world. Spiritual models are a little bit different things, and there are many different traditions and religious spiritual traditions that offer different models. How many are there? Nines or 10? Are there 100? So they're kind of all over, and I kind of do an overview of the different dimensions, the different spiritual dimensions in the book. The one thing I do mention is that I'm the one author, Barbara Hanclough, uh, got a book from. Now she channeled this book from the Palladians, Palladian female, and it took her 2 years to figure out how even to present the material. But the book is called the Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions, and she takes that content that she got from the Palladians and tied it in with her Cherokee background to have it's a very tangible way to look at spiritual dimensions. And her husband, Jerry Clow, developed a guided meditation for people that they can kind of experience different dimensions outside, outside, kind of take a break from our physicality, our physical world, and transcend and take a visit into these other dimensions. And so it's really cool. I would suggest that, and I have that reference in the book. Of the spiritual models, many of them start with the first dimension as the I am, the all that is, God, its source, as a first part. And one philosopher said, everything was created in the universe when I am asked itself, what else can I become? And from that moment on, that was the explosion, that people could, say that it could be the Big Bang theory, whatever it may be. But it was when the single consciousness wanted to know and experience itself from other perspectives, that's when everything blew up in a sense so that it could experience itself in different ways. And so we have a dimensional existence, and it's a lot of it has to do with frequency and energy as well. And so in general, and again, I'm going quick through this, but I just want to give you a flavor that the lower dimensions are dense, heavy, with a strong sense of individuality and separation. Right? Third dimension, that's what we are. We're separate. I'm here, you're there, and there's a distance. When we leave that third dimension, and we will at some point when our physical bodies you know leave, crap out on us, but when we leave that third dimension, then we'll get it. And you say, well, how do you know? Well, talk to 3,500 people who experience near-death experiences, and they're almost always the same. Oh, over 50 years of research have several commonalities, and the oneness and and many other things related to experience life outside of our bodies. Those people can testify to that, and so. That's the lower dimensions, and then higher dimensions are light, transparent, flexible. Um, Now, I hope I can do this correctly here, or can get this on this presentation. But while we reside physically in the third dimension, right, our physical world, we can experience any other dimensions at any time, with practice. And a lot of that is guided meditations, etc. Psychedelic drugs as well. You can't rule them out. They've been around for tens of thousands of years, and indigenous tribes use it to this day for spiritual awakening. So that is another option. But what I'm talking about here is now this is Bashar. So Bashar is a non-physical, multi-dimensional being from the Assassinii civilization outside, close to the constellation Orion. And he communicates through this fellow, Daryl Anka. He's quite prevalent in social media and a lot of videos and courses he leads. But his model was saying like, okay, we have dimensions, and we have third, fourth, and fifth. So you like to take these three, and then we have densities. And so the difference between a dimension and a density, he said, and also another author, Lisa Royal Holt, agrees with this, that the third density, or that dimensions, I'm sorry, dimensions are like a country, like you're living in the United States. The density is a state within that country. So we can be in the third dimension, and we are. We reside in the third dimension right now. But we can, and what we're experiencing now is a shift from the third to the fourth dimension. And we're moving up in vibrational, energetic levels. And that's part of the ascension process, is that we're seeing more non-physical, we're seeing more psychic senses, we're feeling more of connection. At not everyone on the planet, obviously, but as a group, as a species on the planet, we're moving collectively into the fourth and eventually into the fifth density. And that is what I mentioned before, moving into the Sati Yuga, moving into the 14th back turn. That's what that means. The time of great oneness, togetherness, unity, love, etc. That's our movement into the fourth, and then eventually into the fifth density. Now, as a species, and this will take many, many, many millions of years, but when we have when we reside mostly in the fifth density, like pure light, pure love, pure unity, that's when, as a species, we'll go into the non-physical. So what Bashar kind of said is that we're in the third to fourth density, in the third and fourth dimension, and we're straddling, heading to the fifth dimension. So that's our plan. I mean, yeah, it's not going to happen in our lifetimes most likely, but that's the idea. And in the book, I kind of, not only that, but here I want to help map out that, yeah, we are moving around, we walk around. Our eyes and ears are just cameras and microphones to our brain and our consciousness. And we are, in a sense, stuck. We're grounded, or we're residing in the third dimension of physicality, which is all about separation and dense and time bound. And that at someday we will experience that freedom, moving from the third and fourth dimension, and experience that more generally. Another way to put this is Mikio Kaku he's kind of a famous physicist. He had a story about he was looking at, as a kid, he remembered looking at a koi pond, very shallow koi pond, and he noticed that the fish couldn't, they didn't, they kind of went forward and backward, left and right, but they didn't know up or down. They're missing out on that third dimension. He said, so if you picked up the fish out of the water, they would experience a whole different thing. People are moving around without fins. They're breathing without gills. It's a whole new world in a sense. And so, and that's when this quote, we spend all our lives going forward and backward, left and right, and up and down, think that anything beyond our pond, and he called it puny little universe, is science fiction. So when you consider our multidimensionality, we start thinking about who we really are, and that a part of us exists in other dimensions, in the fourth, fifth, sixth dimension. But now, for this point in time in your life and experience, you have been incarnated into this planet on the third, living in a 3D world. So that's the multidimensionality part of that. And that, the other part of that is that as we move out of the third dimension, we will experience more, it'll be easier to experience oneness and more of a unity consciousness, love, all that will come more freely than when it's easy to, to look at someone and say, you're separate from me. I don't like you. You're probably after me, whatever it may be. So that is it on the multidimensionality. Any quick questions before I get to the next section? No? Okay. Okay. Our divine self. So taking a step further from our multidimensional nature, we take it back to where we originate from. And we all come from one place. We all come from the I am. Lisa Royal Holt calls it the golden lake. It is the all that is. It's God being in with no form or no light. And as I mentioned before, that I am asked the question, what else can I become? And then that's when it exploded into who we are in a sense. And it's like, Neil Donald Walsh said, we shattered like a mirror. God, source shattered itself into trillions and trillions of fragments, so like a mirror, so that there is God in each one of us. Each one of us has that mirror. Also, the idea of a hologram. If you take a hologram picture of a tree, and then you take that hologram and cut it into pieces, a true hologram, every piece of that picture of the tree will have the information of the entire tree in it. So that's the idea of the oneness, that we can experience, or that we are, and that we can experience if we go there, which hopefully we will in a few minutes. The other idea is a fractal. A fractal is a repeating pattern that makes a bigger pattern, like a snowflake. If you look at a snowflake, it looks all fine, all the branches going out. But if you look closely, it's a repeated design of ice crystals that's repeated exactly, but many, many times. So that's oneness is where we are, where we came from, and where we will be going to at some point in our soul journey. And so to understand that we are part of God, and again, this goes against, I went through a period of a couple of the Protestant denominations, and, you're separate, God's up there, we're down here, you're no good. And someday maybe, God will forgive you and you'll be okay. No, that's not the case. We are part of God now, and we can boldly say that. And feel as we feel it, it will even help you accept that more and more. And we can do that through meditation. And I think that's also part of the awakening, that people will start to get that. They'll start to feel that oneness and step into their own divinity and their own sovereignty, that say, yes, I am a part of God as well as you. And so that certainly would help people, not kill each other as much as if we realize that our divine nature, not only in ourselves, but in others. And then some of the religions, and that's what I say. And I went to seminary for 3/4 of a master's degree, and and just dropped out because I couldn't. It was a box for me. But in many of the religions, you have the idea of oneness, but in teaching in day to day, separation usually takes over. But especially the Christians, the message of separation and sinfulness and all that. You look at Jesus saying, "I've given them," and his priestly prayer, "I've given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one." He's making that connection between him and his Father. He was talking spiritual source, that we may be just as that. And then Rumi, saying, not a drop in the ocean, you entire ocean in a drop. And then Schrodinger, modern day physicist, told the number of minds in the universe is one. And that's creeping in, by the way, consciousness, a kind of a unified theory, that Einstein spent the rest of his life working on after E = mc², some sort of unified theory, other people thinking about it too, that that unified theory, that unified field might be consciousness itself. And Mikio Kaku said that it when you think in terms, and this is getting a little bit over my head, but what he was saying is that there's a lot of mathematical problems and barriers and problems that don't answer everything. But when you enter in and consider an overall consciousness as being the backdrop to a lot of things, then things start making sense. So who knows? Maybe in the not too distant future, there will be an acceptance of a unified consciousness as being how the universe is all tied together. Could be. Einstein, all points in space and time are connected, same concept. So it's in and around there. And it all to me points back to our divine source, our divine self as well. So what I have is to experience, and this to me was profound for me. And let me see if I can get this. Was to experience that oneness for myself. And when I heard this, the concept, the person who kind of presented it said, once you make the connection, a deep connection that you are one with the divine, that's it. Game's over. She was being kind of sarcastic. Game's over. You don't need to learn anything because you're there. You get it. And so this meditation was, and given to me, and I've done it a few times, and I would like for you to experience here. So first, let me check the sound before we get started here. Can you hear that? Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. This is you just close your eyes, calm your mind, relax, and I'll walk you through this meditation of who you are. You have a name, an address, and a family. Maybe you're tall or short, have brown hair or blonde. There are many things that make you unique. But you're much more than that, something many of us miss. To see what I mean by this, I invite you to close your eyes, relax, and let this visualization take you on a journey. Imagine that you're in a darkened room. In front of you is a long, narrow table with a black tablecloth. And it extends to both your right and your left. Now, one by one, in your mind's eye, place things on the table that make you who you are in this life. You may want to start with your name, your age, gender, your address, your date of birth. You may want to also add the schools that you went to, your driver's license, anything that identifies you as you. Maybe that you're a father, a mother, a son. You can place all the childhood memories on the table as well. Just for a few moments, you'll get them back. So as you're putting these on the table, make sure you don't miss anything that makes you who you are or distinguishes you from all others. Now, after you've placed everything that defines you on the table, what's left? Who is standing there looking at all these things? Some might say there's nothing standing there because a person is the sum total of all that defines them. Others might say the timeless essence of the person remains, their consciousness or infinite soul. Spend some time in this place, looking at the things on the table, remembering that you are not the items and attributes on the table. You're much more. Now turn around so your back is to the table. You're looking now into nothingness. There's no form, there's no images, there's no thought, no sound. Be present in this moment. This is the all that is, the source, the eternal consciousness of the universe. It's God without all the religious descriptions. You feel safe. Picture yourself being enveloped in this nothingness, like a drop of water falling back into the ocean. Stay in this state for several moments. Feel the warm love, the feel of home, and the expansiveness of being a part of everything. Feel the intense and profound peace. This is what eternal reality feels like. Now, when you're ready, turn back towards a table that you placed all the items that made you you. The moment you do this, you are projecting your consciousness into the physical world. You're fractalizing your divine energy and recreating the hologram of this life and of this time. By seeing the difference of you looking at all the aspects of yourself and then projecting yourself into all the aspects of yourself, you can see how unreal these things are and how eternal you can be. They're a projection, very real to you in this time, but still a projection. It's just like waking up from a vivid dream that moments before was real to you. After sitting with these thoughts and emotions for some time, slowly and gently come back to your awakened state here. You can come back to this time anytime you want. Now you're back. This is how we can see beyond the chaos, beyond the unrest and hatred, and return to home, to the peace and love and the only real things in this universe. Okay, sorry for that hard end. So did any of you have feelings about, did you get to that spot? Did you experience that separation in unity and then back to separation again? Good. Okay. Sorry, go on to the next slide here. Can't find it. Okay. Okay, that is our divine connection. That is our home. That is who we are. And our sovereign nation. A lot of people talk about being stepping into our own power. That's what we can think about and remember that that's our true nature. Okay, so um, The next step, we're going to pivot a little bit and to looking at our largest barrier to both our divine connection and to, and I'll get into this in a little bit, to interacting with our ET neighbors. The largest barrier on both of these is addressing our shadow self. And this is, a lyric in When I'm Gone from Three Doors Down. But the shadow self, and this goes back to Jung and others, Freud, all talk about a shadow self. And there's different takes on it psychologically, but it's basically things about yourself that you're not proud of, that you don't like, that no one knows. They're secrets that you're ashamed of. It could be a secret addiction. It could be just something that someone told you that you're no good, you can't talk, you be quiet. So you feel ashamed about talking in public or speaking up. But it could also be just just not being, you don't feel smart, you don't feel good enough. Those types of things are your shadow self. And we all have them. And the issue is that if you don't address that the more you address your shadow selves and not get away, not rid it, not get, if it's an addiction or something, just deal with it and move on. The thing with the shadow selves is that you don't have to do anything with them other than embrace them. That's all you have to do is just acknowledge to yourself, yeah, this is my shadow self. It is ugly. It is not who I want to be. But once you accept our shadow selves and the things about us that we don't like, that's when true growth and continuity can move in your life. And then this is another kind of aha moment I had when developing this manuscript was that it's a little complicated here, but basically we have levels of consciousness, right? And we have the conscious level, subconscious, which is like dream states, just things you're not aware of, and then unconscious level, which is like deep sleep, etc. And Freud initially came up with, if you may have remembered, but the iceberg model, where he said your perception, your reality is based on it's like the iceberg that's out of the water, and you're aware of it, you can see it, etc. But the larger part of our minds are submerged under the water. And then he broke it into memories and stored knowledge, and then deep fears, violent motives. These are all his definitions of the shadow selves, the sexual desires, the irrational wishes. We all have them, he would say, and that they're under the surface. We're not in our conscious level. And brainwave frequencies, before I get to this other, Sasha's model, the brainwave frequencies is that in our awakened state is our the beta frequencies, and then the subconscious level, the not only dreams but just the proverbial thinking in the shower, your mind is kind of engaged but kind of not driving. These are the alpha and theta waves, frequencies, and then delta is pretty much deeper, unconscious, you're unaware. Now, in Lisa Royal Holt's book called Preparing for Contact, she was channeling Sasha, a fifth dimensional Pleiadian female as well. And in that, one of the chapters, I was astounded that Sasha said that people have three minds. There's three levels to a mind. And it's the awakened, the awareness, and then the subconscious and unconscious. Label them just like that. And Sasha gave the example of, suppose you're in a conference, in a lecture hall, and it's all, you're not up on stands, you're kind of looking, everybody's on the same level, and you can see the person in the front of the room, but you're in the back. So all you can see is their head and shoulders. You can see some information, you can hear them certainly, but you can pick up some information from them, where they're looking, the direction that they are looking in. Are they reading? Are they not? Whatever. But if you move up in the room closer to the front, you might see more of them. You might see, their arms and hands. They may be gesturing that you couldn't see before because you were in the back. You couldn't see it. And then if you move up to the front row, you can see the whole person speaking. You can see if their legs are crossed. You can see what kind of shoes they have on. And you can see their arms, and you can see their head, you can see their shoulders. And that way you can see the whole person and pick up on all those nonverbal cues that will give you more information about what this person is, speaking about, and who they are. And Sasha, and that's when I made the connection, like, wow, this is just very close to what Freud had mapped out, and certainly Jung as well. That the three levels, the three minds. And the fascinating thing was that Sasha said that ETs, extraterrestrials, advanced beings, where we're headed as a species eventually, when you get to a certain point, we get beyond verbal and we get more into telepathy and engage our mind in ways that we can't even fathom right now. That's where they are. That's where the ETs are, advanced beings. They see all these three levels at the same time. And so, okay, what does that mean? So what it means is that when they just look at this picture, it's like when they look at someone who has a lot of internal turmoil, um, a lot of rejection, self-rejection issues. It's like, people coming over like, oh, let's go meet the neighbors. And they come over and bring a cake to the neighbors. And they find out that, or they hear that there's fighting going on in the house. There's people screaming. That's what a person who isn't emotionally coherent or accepting of themselves, that they have this internal turmoil. This is what's going on in their world. And so when an ET, it comes to us, and to people who especially haven't accepted themselves fully, and as Mary Schronberger says, observe, acknowledge, and haven't integrated the parts of their shadow back into the bigger parts of their selves. That's what is happening. And so it's an important first step in thinking about our galactic neighbors, and it happens to be obviously the same barriers in our connection with the divine as well. If we have a lot of internal turmoil, we'll have a much better way and have a much better experience accepting our divine nature if we accept ourselves. So and I get into this a little bit in the book, but but to say that there is hope, that we can learn to embrace our shadow, and there's lots online about that, and certainly therapists can help you with that. But basically, how do we embrace our shadow? We work on dissolving our fears, rigid views, working through them, begin to know who you are and understand that you can change perceptions of certain things that you've known, and maybe are having a hard time getting distancing yourself from. Find your own demons, find your own fears, find the part of you that hates yourself, and accept and embrace all of yourself. And as Dr. Michael Kendall is on today, and he and I have actually, he helped read some of the manuscripts, early manuscripts of the book, and he and I have wonderful discussions about that. And not that it's like the obvious thing, but his common theme is unconditional love of yourself. Like, that's the key in embracing our shadow. So, and that's a key as well. So we're going to go into kind of a ET 101 here next. And I want to emphasize one thing, is that most people that experienced channelers of ETs, and those who have had robust interactions with them, they all say that the first step in communicating with our extraterrestrial neighbors and learning more about them, the first step begins with ourselves. And this is what they're talking about, our shadow selves, getting rid of our fears, getting, accept, not getting rid of them, as I say, owning them, becoming comfortable with them to the best you can, knowing that we're looking at ourselves, lots of parts that we don't like, but that's us. That's unconditional love. And that will explode out to others once we do that to ourselves. Okay, just doing a little time check here. We're doing pretty good. Um, Okay, so the other part of this book and message is contact with our extraterrestrial neighbors. The idea is that as humans move into the time of oneness, higher vibrational levels, getting out of the third, going to the fourth density and dimension, um, once we have a grasp on our oneness and exhibit unity consciousness as a whole, that's when our ET neighbors are going to send out the signal saying they're good, they're okay now, they're safe. It's safe to go there. So that's why it's important to connect because a lot of people, if you are into this genre, there's people saying, "Oh, in 2 years we'll get the first contact," and no, in 10 years, no, maybe whatever it may be. You get these people saying the first contact with ETs is imminent. I think it's important to at least consider that because I think it is coming. I don't know exactly when, possibly because it's up to us and how we react as and how we grow as humans. But that's why it's important to think about this because I think it is coming more and more into play. And so the two questions I address, and these are two different chapters in the book, do they or don't they exist? All right, let's just call it. Let's just look at it, right? So I do a little summary on the official government reports, that they state this is what's happened, whatever, sightings, et cetera. And then government cover-ups, which have been exposed. And one big thing that happened during the Biden administration was the whistleblower law came into place for government employees to be able to safely share what they have known and seen and reported on, but were chastised and their careers sidebarred and fired and lives threatened if they were to go out in public and say, yeah, I saw a ship, it landed on this base and people came out, whatever it may be, that that is coming out more and more. The first one happened 2 years ago. The first trial, in a sense, or hearing. I guess hearing is the best. And then the second one occurred with that. The first one was just with one person. The second one happened just this past September with three other military personnel who came out. One person said they saw some things. They saw, I think she saw like a cube that was spinning around and round, near a base, and she was told to not mention it ever again, and that her life was threatened. So we have protections going in and coming in place for people to talk about this. And then we have the tens of thousands of unofficial reports, and these are the TV shows and this and that, leaked memos of documents back from 30 years ago, about the biggest thing was the crash recovery program that's been that the U.S. government has been operating for 30 years. And it goes out and, people go out, a crash happens on, technology beyond human capabilities, biologics, recovered, but they're told, not to say anything. In addition to one person I've quoted on their video said that the U.S. government was staging abduction scenarios to lay the groundwork of a fear-based approach to UFOs and aliens moving forward. And the fellow Scott Dottie, I think his name was, he said right on camera, he said, "Yeah, we did that. Yeah, we got people who had like defects and stuff, and we would set them up to like in scary situations to lay the groundwork for psychological influencing of of how we have to get rid of these people." I'm putting that in, a negative aspect, a negative perspective of ETs. So you have all that coming into play. And then I get into sacred sites. I went to Egypt last year and was fascinated by some of the temples and how they pointed to the stars, especially the Temple of Hathor with the seven sisters that had many archaeological or not architectural designs that would point to the seven sisters of the Pleiades, and then certainly channeled information. And I list like 15 channelers. Then I only pick the channelers that have been doing this for more than 10 or 20 years. So you have, like I mentioned before, people who 30, 40 years, they're just writing their books, channeling, writing their books, and they get, some notoriety, maybe not much that it could be, but they're there's just so much information you can't as a I'm a researcher psychologist. I understand all the research methods, but you can't when you have a body of evidence or a body of information about something, you can't just shove it all under the rug. And then why? Okay, so they exist, and why haven't they contacted us? And then I go through the common scenarios that they're not like us. They don't want to take us over and put a Martian flag on our planet. No, they're way beyond us. Millions of years, hundreds of millions of years. Another one could be that there could be a prime directive, just like in Star Trek. You don't mess with a less mature civilization. We're not ready. Could be another one. Bashar, I love this quote. Bashar said, and I have it in the book. He said, "People wonder why we don't contact you," and he said, "Why would we want to land our ships in an insane asylum where all the inmates have guns?" So that I just thought that was so great. I mean, anyway. So the other thing is we're not interesting enough. I mean, my scenario is that just think of a person like in the 1500s, in the U.S., or I guess not later than that, 1700s, in the U.S., trying to build a cabin or a town out of logs and mucking through the mud with horses and buggies and trying to do this, and that if you take those people and pick them up and fast forward and drop them into Times Square, modern day, they're freak out because what are these metal things, like horseless carriages, what are lights and sounds, and they could hardly contain it. It would probably not be able to process that. So take a look at us. Suppose you pick us up and put us down 100 million years in the future. How are we going to change there? And so it's that different. It's that different of a perspective that we have to keep in mind. And then there's communication barriers. They're at a higher level, we're at a faster vibration level than us, and then they're already here in the in behind the scenes and have been here for millions of years. That is another reason for that. So that's what I think it's good to do. It's like let's just address the hard questions up front and at least provide some thoughtful and information about that as we in the news, and as I think we'll hear more and more. There'll be a day, I think, when an ET will make its presence known, and that is the first contact when it's widely known, and humans will start interacting with them, setting up commerce, setting up knowledge exchange, setting up resource exchange. That's going to happen, and I don't think it's not like thousands of years from now. I think it's going to be sooner than later. So on the final component of this. I call it the other part of the ET 101. And I map out maybe six or seven galactic civilizations, and I just have a few here. But almost everyone that I researched, maybe two or three dozen sources familiar with ET interactions. Everyone says it all started, that the humans all started in the constellation Lyra. That's when the first humanoids were created out of the all that is, out of the one. That was the first humanoid uh, civilization, and they initially, and they were, they had their background of wisdom and love and service to others for millions of years. Then, unfortunately, something could be deemed as bad, but what happened is another civilization interacted with the Lyrans, called the Dracos or the Reptilians, and had a war. It was a war. And because of that, the Lyrans spread throughout all the universe, not all the universe, spread throughout much of the universe. Many of them said, some people say many of them landed here on Earth first, but because of the environment, they were failing. So then they moved on to the Pleiades, which has about 400 planets in that system that they were involved in. They landed and colonized, and then they came back to Earth after that. And, who knows, right? Exactly. And then the Syrians the Lyrians also landed in the Sirius system. And then the Syrians, evolved and created their own cultures, etc., as well. And then other ones are the Andromedans, the Zeta Reticuli. Those are the grays, very common. You hear about the grays and see them all the time. And then non-human, they're reptilians, the mantis, the insectoids, all conscious, highly evolved in many cases, beings that look like a reptile, a mantis, or insects. Interesting concept. And then there's non-physical civilizations, Arcturians and the Assassini, as I mentioned about Bashar. And then most people say that the Pleiadians and Syrians have been the most involved with our planet in recent times. And in recent times, I mean the last 10, 20,000 years. They are here to help us evolve and help us on our journey. Important point, because that's where they went through the same thing, the same battles of polarization, the same battles of tyranny and greed and power, a few over the many. They went through that. And so they can, in their past. So that's what they have to bring to the table for us and to help us do that and conquer that. Okay, so now preparing for contact. Lots of people doing this, have done it, and teach about it. And it's maybe not as many as you'd think, but it's out there. A friend of mine, Marty Rawson, who wrote chapter 17 in the book about his protocol for contacting and having contact with ET or ET neighbors. And right here, he has the three categories, as in a lot of it you kind of already. There's physical and energetic environments. Again, positivity, energy clearing, being aware of your own state of mind and heart, those types of things, preparing your energy field, maintaining gratitude, which is love, and using the gratitude to bridge to pure love, um, and then write down what your experiences are. So those are his three very general things to do if you want to connect. And now remember, as I forget who said this, the ETs that are around us now, Many people say we've all been in contact with ETs, uh, probably throughout our whole lives, but at the subconscious level, in dreams, in those really crazy dreams that maybe you can't explain. It could be that, you don't know for sure. Um, but but we have to remember that ETs are not like you know um, the beluga whales at SeaWorld. We don't go to them and say, here's a fish, and appear tonight to me because I'm saying these things and playing this music. No, they have their own agenda, and they may or may not, answer to these, simple types of requests. But over time, if we have uh, our hearts and minds in line, and if there is a willingness on our part to be of service to others, um, and want their and put up our hand like, hey, I'm willing to help, whatever you want, let me know. That's when real contact could happen. I mentioned Steve Greer. Sometimes he's controversial. He's a little bit of a name dropper at times, but he has some great, vast volumes of information out there. And he has this one, CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is an interaction with our ETs. He has an app for like $8, and it's really cool. He goes through, he has lots of resources and guided meditations. His thing is coherent thought sequencing. And that goes back to the shadow self to kind of help yourself be in line, all in line from your deep unconscious, subconscious, conscious, in line, that coherent thought. And then remote viewing. Why? Remote viewing to let them know where we are. That's his model. He said, picture where you are in on the planet, in whatever state you're in, whatever, down to the last, where you are on the street, or in your backyard, or you're in the field, whatever it may be. But picture that, and in your mind's eye, and send it out, and that's how they can spot you in a sense and identify that. So I think it was made an impact for me. And he said he was channeled this information through um, I don't know if he named it, but through an ET relationship that he had. He worked on it for 14 years. So I thought it was worth bringing up. So back to, and then we're getting to the end here. Yes. Initiating contact. Marty Rawson said, the one thing that you can do is just to keep this intention out there, put this out there. I invite all beings of light, and he's very adamant on inviting in beings of light, because there are bad actors in our extraterrestrial world. Everyone knows that. Everyone agrees. And everyone also agrees that they're in the single digit percent point of the entire universe of ETs. There are bad actors. They're around, and maybe they're there for a purpose. You don't know. If it weren't for the reptilians invading Lyra, the universe would be just contained within one system. In any case, I invite all beings of light working within the divine plan to actively participate in my life, guide me, protect me, and communicate with me in the most efficient way for my best and highest good. That's really the core of what Marty has to offer and encourages us to do. Um, and then he has a daily affirmation down there. Again, so I may be of divine service to earth and humanity, for the highest good of all concerned. So it's that posture that we can have, and maintain. And when we do that, we can start maybe seeing the synchronicities, seeing the things. The dreams are probably the biggest thing to keep aware of, because that's how our ET neighbors communicate with us. I've been doing that just personally. I haven't told anyone this. You're the first to know. I've been wanting to do that, make a hardcore interactive, like, visit, and I haven't had that yet. I can certainly feel them. I have a scrying thing that I do with the Palladians, but it's still it's just writing. that they things that they tell me to come to mind. But I wanted something more concrete than that. And I had a dream about 2 months ago, and I was in a room, and there in the off to the right was a doorway, an open doorway, and I saw like something outside the door, like a limb, like a appendage or something outside the door, and something partially like looked in. And then I looked at it and I saw it wasn't human. It was like a gray. It was something not human, and it freaked me out. I'm like, no, it's like seeing a snake. Like I hate snakes. It's like somebody dropped a snake in my lap. That's the effect it had. And then the clear statement after that said, he's not ready. So I'm like, okay, message received. Um, okay, so I hope I didn't go too fast for you this evening. Thank you for coming in, and those of you who listen to this later, I hope you receive the same. You get something out of it that you hadn't known about. Challenge you to go beyond your boundaries or your comfort zones, and take a walk into something outside of yourself and grow in that way.